Good evening. It's August 31st, and we have our difficulties in life, especially today with this new variant from Delta variant from India. It's right now in Israel, we're not in a lockdown. Everything is going on almost like regular. We're wearing masks in the street again, in public places, buses. Life is very temporary. You feel more how temporary is life when you live in Israel. Because in Israel, we're living in the middle of a hot spot in the Middle East. Now the north is Hezbollah, which has a lot of weapons. There have been some confrontations in the north, and Israel is trying its best not to get involved in a war with Hezbollah. They've been supplied with many rockets from Iran. And the country of Lebanon is very, very bad shape. And Israel has to think of also the nation of Lebanon. Hezbollah is a terrorist group within Lebanon. Then we have Syria. Iran is moving into Syria, trying its best to get a hold of Syria. Syria is like a puppet to Iran today. Both are Shiite. Syria is Shiite Muslim, and Iran is Shiite Muslim. Hezbollah is Shiite Muslim. Then Israel has become a Jewish state in 1948, and it's been confronted several times on its to the sovereignty of Israel over the land of Israel. In the Six-Day War, Israel succeeded to take the whole biblical territory of Israel in 6 days. The Arabs have not given up. They're still trying to get back to the borders before the Six-Day War. And then in the south, we have in the Gaza Strip, there is the Hamas, and somehow they gained control over Gaza, and they have made several wars with Israel. Israel developed the Iron Dome defense system. They have shot thousands of missiles, and they haven't done so much damage. But Israel still cannot be able to go back into the Gaza Strip and take the country back. I don't know if what they want to do. I'm not in charge of this government. I live in Israel, and I'm happy to be in Israel. I was born on Israel Independence Day in the American calendar. That is May 14th, the first anniversary. I think my connection to Israel, the modern state of Israel, was from the day of my birth. When I came to Israel, that is after I had decided I wanted to live a Jewish life and make a Jewish family. I've been told by the religious leaders that not to love the state of Israel, and even to hate it. These were rabbinical leaders that of the Orthodox Jewish world in America. There was, I don't know if there were any really Orthodox Jewish leaders that were really love Israel, the state of Israel. Medinat Israel, as it's called. Maybe there was a Mizrahi Orthodox leader that supported Israel. The American Mizrahi support Israel. They're Orthodox, but at the same time, they are very much interwoven with the secular world, much more than the Orthodox Jews, Ashkenazi, and Hasidic. Another problem for a young adult in America, Jewish, born in a Jewish family, that he wants to connect to his Jewish heritage, is that when he is living in a secular Jewish home, he has love for everyone. He loves old people. He loves Orientals. He loves even black people, Spanish people. He has respect for all mankind. Now he is decided he wants to raise a Jewish family, and in Judaism, there's only one chosen people, that's the Jewish people, and Jewish children are being taught disrespect for the other nations of the world. You know that the other nations of the world are called Goyim. Goyim basically it means nations, but the word is used derogatory way, Goyim. That they are Goyim. Jews are superior, and the other nations are called Goyim. So here, a young man who is growing up in America, and he's in a secular environment, he doesn't think that way. And now he's being educated in a new way when he comes into what's called the About Tshuva, or the schools for boys to go back to their heritage. And now he's being told to look at the world in a different light. It's hard for him to buy it. It's not only a different light, but he's being taught that there's no light outside, there's only light in the Jewish world. Jews are a minority. In America, they're living in foreign countries. There is in every community in America, church, mosques. We didn't see many mosques in America when we were young. The churches, there were. Jews and Christians are not, by far not friends. Christians are looking to convert Jews, to become Jews for Jesus. And they're out there, they come to your door, the Jehovah Witnesses, with books talking about Jehovah and all these other things, Seventh-day Adventurists. There's a lot of different sects of Christianity out there. Jew knows that he's a Jew. He's born from his ancestors who are Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And God gave the Jewish people the Torah. It gives the Jew a lot of prestige because we were given the Torah. It's prestigious to receive the Torah and to represent the Torah. And the Jews are representing the Torah are devoted to the scriptures, Torah scriptures, on different levels. There are Talmidei Chachamim, Torah scholars, that know and have learned the whole Torah. And they're thorough in everything in the Torah. And they are the rabbis of our communities. And they know exactly how to run a congregation. And as a Jew growing up in a secular world, I always had respect for our neighborhood rabbi. Because he was a wonderful man, very devoted to Judaism. I didn't exactly know everything about Judaism, but I had respect for him, the rabbi. Other rabbis, I didn't know very much about other rabbis, or about Hasidic groups. Hasidic groups live separately. There are other communities. Our community only had one Orthodox Jew synagogue nearby. And out of 1,000 Jewish families, there was maybe only 20 Orthodox Jewish families. In my last video, I spoke about the importance of religion. Religion has a purpose. Moses, who was learned also in the universal faith and also in religion, he broke the first tablets of the Ten Commandments because he saw that the people needed religion. They didn't need the secrets of the Torah, the Kabbalah. They needed religion because to have a family, you need a religion. It could be Judaism, it could be Christianity, it could be Islam. Because the children need to be educated in morals and ethics. And it has to be instilled in the children's simple faith in God. Not knowledge of God. Knowledge of God is on a higher level. Knowledge of God is connected to the universal faith. And in Judaism, it's connected to the highest level of unity of the Shema Yisrael. But there is the lower level of unity, Shem Kavod, which is only Jewish. Now, being exposed to the outside world, when you come into the Jewish world, you come into an environment that is only Jewish. Christianity is idolatry. Yoga is idolatry. Buddhism is idolatry. Islam is not idolatry, but it's an enemy of Israel. It's in competition with Israel, who is the nation of God on earth. Islam claims to be the nation of God, and also the Jewish people claim to be the nation of God. So, here now, you are being educated at the age of 20 years old to know about Judaism. You've accepted to try the way of Judaism because that's the religion which you are grown up, your parents, you're descended from Orthodox Judaism. Even though my parents were not Orthodox, but their great grandfather and grandmother were Orthodox. That's why they were still Jews. Because when Jews go away from Orthodox Judaism, eventually they assimilate. So the fact that I was a Jew and I knew I was a Jew was because my great grandfather was Orthodox. And it could have happened that some of his children were less Orthodox, and then my parents were half Orthodox, and my father was a little Orthodox. So I had some sort of Orthodox background. Now I'm learning in Lubavitch. Lubavitch accepts people from the outside, no matter what their backgrounds are. And they have a certain a technique. And there's a Lubavitch technique of educating these young men who are coming from the outside. And there's another school in another place. It was at that time Sher Yashiv in Far Rockaway. They were teaching one way of Judaism without delving in at all into the Kabbalah. While the Lubavitch, they teach Judaism, but they also have a connection to the Kabbalah. Sher Yashiv, they're teaching basically the laws and commandments, and the boys there are being educated in order that they should be able to get married and make a family. They're learning mostly the Talmud and Jewish law and other books. The Lubavitch has esoteric Judaism. They have a leader who is knowledgeable in all parts of Judaism, esoteric, law. The Gadol Hador, he was, the Rebbe. The Rebbe was the greatest of his generation. And I had a chance even to meet him privately after my wedding with my wife. And I would be able to see him quite often since I lived in Brooklyn. And he spoke publicly. I prayed with him. It was a tremendous experience to connect with the Lubavitch Rebbe. Now, in the major text of Lubavitch, which is called the Tanya, it speaks very, very, very harshly about non-Jew, the non-Jews, and the world in general, except for the Jewish world. The Jewish world is called, it says there, the world where there's holiness. The outside, there's no holiness. The outside meaning not in the Jewish world. So that is Judaism. In Judaism, everything that is Jewish is holy, and anything that's not Jewish, either it's idolatry or it's just not sanctified, not holy. So, if a person studies yoga, he studies meditation, breathing, relaxation, it's not. It might be he might benefit from it, but no holiness in it. But if he does meditation and relaxes and he visualizes the name of Hashem, the name of God, when he's meditating, and then he'll speak to God in his own words and make prayer, then he's entering into holiness. Except that the fact that he's saying his own prayers, there's a question if these prayers are holy or not. Praying in your own words was never the way in Judaism. It's something new. It was introduced to Judaism by Rabbi Nachman of Breslau. That he told his people, his students and his followers, pray to God in your own words, in your own language, in your own heart. This was something new in Judaism. Now the Lubavitch also, since they taught the teachings of the Zohar, not directly, the Lubavitch would not learn the Zohar directly or other Kabbalic works directly. They learn it only in their own, the text of their own leaders. Yeah, but the Zohar is also new. It's new to Judaism. It's only 700 years it's been revealed in Judaism. So prayer, in the way of Rabbi Nachman, is new. Speaking to God in your own words. But there's one problem with that. That's universal. To pray in your own words is universal. And Rabbi Nachman gave this advice. But in Judaism, whatever is universal is suppressed. So all these years until Rabbi Nachman came into Judaism, the prayer in your own words was suppressed. Also, those teachings that are in the Zohar, which talk about the universal faith, these teachings were suppressed in Judaism until they were revealed through the Zohar, and then revealed through Hasidism. Baal Shem Tov, the leader of Hasidism, he initiated the way of teaching, bringing these teachings of the Zohar into Judaism, which are universal teachings, universal faith. However, the Talmud is very, very one-sided. And the foundation of Judaism is the Talmud. And it's completely one-sided. Judaism is holy, and everything that's outside is either idolatry or not holy. Jewish law. When I first come into Judaism, I begin to study Jewish law. The Lubavitcher Rebbe has even instituted learning the Rambam, which is the fastest way to know about Jewish law, because the Rambam compiled and all the laws of the Torah in his books, and therefore by learning his book, which is called Mishnah Torah, you are introduced to Jewish law. And you see what is Jewish law. Before you come to Judaism, you don't know Jewish law. You have an idea about some things in Jewish law, that you know there's a Sabbath, you know there's holidays. But Jewish law is very diversified. You become initiated in Jewish law in these schools, and you begin to learn that. And one of the things that you're being told and you're being instructed by your mentors that you have to surrender your freedom. Now, that's shocking to a person who grew up in America at the age of 20. He should now surrender his freedom? Who wants to surrender your freedom? You want to become a slave when you are a free man? Okay. But that's one of the things that's being taught to Jews. Surrender your freedom. Now, if you are born in the Orthodox Jewish home, you won't be asked to surrender your freedom, because you'll be born in an environment from the very beginning when there was no freedom. And therefore, you don't really know what freedom is when you're growing up in an Orthodox Jewish home. But when you come 20 years old and you've been out of the Orthodox Jewish home for 1 or 2 generations, your family, so you have the experience of freedom. Now these schools have the difficulty to make these penitents, when they come back, they should surrender their freedom. You have to be a slave. You have to be a slave servant to God. You're not a free man when you're living in the Jewish way, the Orthodox Jewish way. Nevertheless, I understood that I still don't know everything about Judaism, and I wanted to know more. At the same time, I could be able to feel free inside and look like I am a not free outside, and do the mitzvahs that everyone else is doing. But I'm coming from the New Age, and many of my teachers were always old age. They were always Orthodox. These were the Torah scholars. I came into Judaism from the outside, and I was inspired on the outside that God is within me, the light of God is inside me, and I could feel God with me all the time. And therefore, I wanted to bring this light of God that was within me into the world in the way that I was born, the religion that I was born in, which is Judaism. And this light of God that was within me, I found out later, it was in me, but not in the Orthodox rabbi or in the Orthodox congregation. I did some meditation and breath meditation, which opened me up to the light of God within me. But in the Orthodox Jewish world, the light of God is in the Torah and the scriptures. However, in one of the major books in Lubavitch, which is from the teachings of the previous rabbi, he left there this teaching in before he passed away on the 10th of Shvat, it says, she built for me a temple that I will dwell within you. So in this work, it says, what does it say? Build a temple that I will dwell within it. In the temple, it should say. Instead, it says within you. So the previous Rebbe says, in each and every person is the light of God. There are many things in the written Torah which can be interpreted to reveal the universal faith, the light of God within you, in the heart. But Moses gave the written Torah, and the written Torah, the interpretation of the written Torah was through the oral Torah. That is the law. And in the law, it's the light of God is in the Torah. It's not in any other place, but in the Torah and in the Torah nation. While in the written Torah, there is two lights. The light of God, which is called the universal faith, and also the law. But in Jewish day schools, in Jewish schools, the law is taught. What is in the written Torah are the secrets of Torah. It's not to be publicized. After the Zohar was revealed 700 years ago, there was a movement to publicize secrets of the Torah, which was expanded upon by Hasidism. And in Lubavitch, their first rabbi, Shneir Zalman of Liedi, publicly spoke the secrets of Torah, these secrets of Torah to the masses. He spread them. He received opposition. He was even put in jail because of it. There are two schools in Judaism. There's the school which learns the oral Torah exclusively and follows the oral Torah, the law of the oral Torah strictly, and suppresses the universal faith, which are the secrets of the written Torah. And there's a school which follows the oral Torah and the laws, and does the mitzvahs according to the oral Torah on different levels. There are those that follow it more strictly, less strictly, and then lightly. But there's also an emphasis on joy and happiness and prayer. Prayer is universal. Torah is strictly Jewish. The Jewish Torah is strictly Jewish. Like we say, God didn't give Mishpatim lo yadu. These mitzvahs of the Jewish Torah, He only gave for Jews. Shabbat, for example. A guy that keeps Shabbat is considered to be, can be put to death, according to the law. Studying the Jewish law and knowing what it entails, it takes many years till you really understand what is expected from you in Judaism. It's expected to you to accept the whole entire Torah, the law, which not the whole whole entire Torah, because we can't know the whole entire Torah, the secrets. We can only know a little about the secrets of God in this world, and they're revealed in the next world after 120 years. But to know all the laws of the Torah, and to study the laws of the Torah. So the laws of the Torah are telling me that I have to be a servant of God and my nation, and I don't have freedom except when I fervently learn the Torah and do the mitzvahs. But there's no freedom except for that. This contradicts what I knew before I became Orthodox. Then I'm being told that, and when not only told, but I'm praying every day to return the Jewish people to Israel. I'm happy. I'm in Israel today. But I'm to change back to a theocracy, a dictatorship. I'm supposed to want a dictatorship, because the kingdom of Israel was a dictatorship. There was a king. King David was a holy man. King Solomon was a holy man. But not all the kings were holy men. Some of them were all dictators. But some of them were more violent than others. And even the greatest of the kings, except for David and Solomon, Hezekiah, he was the strictest of all the kings that there ever were. He put a sword on top of the learning place, of tent of learning, and he threatened anyone who doesn't learn the Torah with the sword. He put a sword over the head of everyone. And we need a sword over us. We need discipline. But the New Age educates through free choice, not through the sword. The sword was the way of the past, in my eyes. So therefore it's difficult when I'm praying and I'm saying the words after we read on Tisha B'Av, the prayer Eicha, which was written by Jeremiah. Jeremiah was the prophet that saw the destruction of the temple. Jeremiah spoke about a new way and a new covenant. A way where everyone will not only be servants to God, they will know God. And even that they won't even have to learn the scriptures. It will be written in their hearts. He wrote Eicha, the sorrow of seeing the Holy Temple destroyed and the Jews were slaughtered by the Romans, by the Babylonians, in the destruction of the first temple. At the end, the Sefer Eicha goes according to Aleph base. The last section of Eicha says Zechor, starts with the letter Zion. It's not according to Aleph base. And in it says, Hashivenu Hashem Elechem Yeshuva Kadesh Yemenu Kedem. Hashem should return us to the way of the past. But I don't want to return to the way of the past. I want to fulfill the Torah in a higher way, which is with knowledge of God and with faith, and also following the commandments. While the old way was through simple faith and the sword over your head. the four misos, the four death penalties over your head. Well, as a Jew, that's what is written in the prayer books. We're praying that the temple should be rebuilt. It was beautiful, the temple, when it stood, and it was sanctification of the name of God in the world. The whole world saw that there's one God, and He has a house in Jerusalem. But it was a Jewish house. It wasn't a house which the prophet said, your house should be a house for all the nations of the world. It wasn't that. King Solomon built the Holy Temple after King David had completed to conquer the land. And it's right after, the next generation after Solomon, there was a civil war within the nation. The people were not happy with Judaism. And they rebelled, and they had a leader, Yehovah ben Nebat, who took 10 tribes of Israel and separated them from Jerusalem, Benjamin, and Judah. Very little we know about it. It's not really publicized in the scriptures, in the Tanakh, but they had kings, just like there were kings in Judah, there were kings in Israel, Shomron. There were prophets in Israel, Shomron. Jonah the prophet, he was from Shomron. He made an attempt to bring the universal faith to the whole world. And his mission to go to the main Goyish city, the main non-Jewish city of Nineveh, and proselytize to them that they can be part of the nation, the biblical nation of Zion. But he had difficulties. He was swallowed in the belly of a whale. The whole story, it's a mystical story. But he didn't succeed. The Assyrians conquered the nation of Israel of Shomron. Before they had, the Babylonians had conquered the nation of Judah. And the nation of Judah was Orthodox, strictly Orthodox Judaism. In the nation of Israel, there was progressive Jewish spirituality, which I write about today. There was more learning of mysticism in the city in Israel of Shomron, and in Judah, there was learning Sanhedrin, learning the laws and enforcing the laws. We lost the 10 tribes because the pursuit of the universal faith is dangerous to Judaism. Judaism is strict. To call names, the Goyim, by all sorts of names, derogatory terminology, in order to separate Jews from non-Jews, that they shouldn't assimilate with non-Jews. The less universal, the more strong is the national Judaism, the Jewish nation. Kabbalah, the secrets of the Torah, which is connected to prophecy, was suppressed in Judah. And in Israel of Shomron, there were much more prophets than in Judah. Later on, the second period of the second temple, which the nation of Israel survived the 70 years of exile in Babylon. They came back. They were no longer prophets. Universal faith was completely suppressed. To the point that there was no prophecy, and there was rebellion amongst the people who wanted to connect to the written Torah as primary before connecting with the oral Torah, the Jewish tradition, the Jewish law tradition that was handed down by Moses to Joshua, because they had the desire for the universal faith. And one of these cults was led by their leader, was a religious Jew who was a rebel, and he fought for freedom. He fought for the universal faith, and he was stopped by the establishment. At that time, the Jews and Romans were working together. Israel was not sovereign in the time of the Second Temple. First, they were a satellite of the Greeks and then of the Romans. And they stopped him, and he was sentenced to death. And later on, he became the Messiah of freedom of the world, even today. He couldn't be received in Judaism as the Messiah of freedom, because in Judaism, we prayed for the Messiah to bring back the dictatorship of Israel, the kingship of Israel, where everyone are servants of God, and there's a sword over our head for those that transgress, and those that sin are called sinners, and and it says in the scriptures they should perish from the earth. Yitamu chatoim min aretz. This is Orthodox Judaism, even today. Now we're living in a new age. Israel, the state of Israel, is a democracy. It's not governed by the law of Israel, the law of Moses. Nevertheless, there are factions within the nation that follow Jewish religion strictly according to the law of Moses. And they are given rights, because there's freedom here, and they're making families. They're living under tensions of corona. They're living under tensions of our neighbors around us that are devoted to destroying us. And Jewish people here are a nation, but they're not the biblical nation of Israel. They're the state of Israel. And I'm happy that I'm living in Israel, because I want to feel that Israel is my nation because they are out, they're giving me support, they're giving me Social Security, they're giving my children, protecting them, they're giving us health insurance. People, there's law and order here. I'm happy that I'm here with the state of Israel as a democratic country. I'm a rebel in the Orthodox world because the Orthodox world is following the oral law that was given by Moses to Joshua, which wants the Jewish people to return to a theocracy, to a dictatorship. There's a conflict in Israel between the New Age and the Old Age. And I'm in the middle because I'm a spokesman for the universal faith in the Jewish world and an Orthodox Jew. I'm following the teachings of the Zohar. The Zohar says you can be connected to the universal faith, and also you should be Orthodox. It's called the way of the chariot, the divine chariot. There is unity of God, knowledge of God, which is the unity of man, Adam, who was the first man, with the ox, the lion, and the eagle, which represent three different spiritual lights. This is unity of God, because in this world there are three religions who are teaching the world simple faith in God in different ways. And the Zohar says, follow your own religion. Be Orthodox Jewish. You don't have to be Orthodox Jewish, which is against the universal faith. But you can be Orthodox Jewish that accepts the world and doesn't hate the world and lives in the world and meditates and relaxes and enjoys the freedom of God, which is the mercy of God. He's not a slave. He's a free man. Also because it's connected to the Messiah of freedom, who is connected to the resurrection of Moses, and Adam, who lived in the Garden of Eden. And he was a free man before he sinned with Eve to populate the world, to build the kingship of God on earth. As the Zohar teaches, there are two messiahs. One is the Messiah of freedom, and one is the Messiah of religion. Jewish religion, the Messiah of Jewish religion is the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The Lubavitcher Rebbe is the essence of Judaism. In world faith is the Messiah of freedom. God should help. I received a big challenge, a big test to to become an Orthodox Jew. It hasn't been easy. I've had 2 crises in my life, which I've come through. And I built a family in the Orthodox world with 7 children. And 5 are married and have many grandchildren. Now I'm 72, I'm divorced. Maybe I'll get married, maybe I won't. I still have the desire of a man or a woman, because all of humanity we are all the slaves of pleasure. We need pleasure, we need physical pleasure. Religion has added on to physical pleasure, spiritual pleasure. Pleasure in religion and pleasure in the universal faith. But I enjoy breakfast. I enjoyed today a half of a falafel. I hadn't had falafel in a pizza for a long time. I'm financially stable now. I'm getting help from the government, and I was happy to receive the stipend from President Trump this year. He was a good man, and I think he was a good leader. I was disappointed that he lost the election because he gave his heart to Israel. President Biden is also a good man. He has a difficult job. Now that Corona has returned to America, and America has pulled out of Afghanistan, and there's the threat of another terrorist attack from Al-Qaeda. Maybe in embassies throughout the world, they have to watch out. I'm part of the world, and I'm Orthodox Jewish. My rabbi, who I respect the most, he is completely against internet. He is vehemently against internet and using these smartphones and Android phones and iPhones. And he's a holy man. He's inspired. He has the soul of the Messiah, I feel. But I'm on the other side. I'm connected to the universal faith, and internet is part of the revelation of God on earth. And I'm happy to be able to share my knowledge with you through YouTube. So I hope that everyone should be well, we should hear good news, and there should be peace, inner peace. Breathe and heal, relax and heal, live and heal, and go out in the world and do good deeds. Love your fellow man. Love your family. My family are the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the Jewish family. But I love all people. I got spoiled in America with freedom, and I couldn't come back. I came back to Judaism, but I came back to Judaism with the universal faith, and a message for everyone. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is your God, the Lord is one. Israel is the whole world.